And you also have this, I guess you might call it a unique relationship with the company Brizo. How did that relationship come around? What does it entail? And tell us about it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting relationship because it wasn't something that was actively sought out. So I think that to me was interesting. It came about organically, which I adore those relationships more so. So it was in an Architectural Digest show, and I comb through and make sure, obviously architects, designers have to really look at everything. And I saw the Brizo presentation, and they had a very comprehensive sustainability presentation. And that really struck me. And I was speaking to their business development and marketing head at the time. And we started talking about things, and she was giving me a lot of background into the design, the R&D, the engineering of it, which obviously as architects, designers, well, I think most geek out about. And so I was really entranced by that. And I was impressed by the way that they were approaching it. I found out that they were owned by a large company. And so then they had the sensibility to dive deep for the Brizo brand into sustainability. So that was my first initial interest, and that really sparked something. So as for clients, we on the client base, so our practice is bespoke, architecture and interiors. We normally do that as a union and together because we feel like we get the most comprehensive, the most kind of holistic experience that way, but sometimes we do one or the other. At the same time, I was launching an eco-luxury spec home brand. And I was looking for partners that were sustainable in all different aspects of a residence. And it's fit in that way. And I said, that would be interesting to discuss showcasing in a way what you're doing at Brizo between the sustainability, and their finishes were really impressive. Like I was really impressed with that. And I could go into it and how they explained to me how they were studying all the droplets of different rainforests and which one held the most amount of water and amount of heat, so that they could save water, but also deliver a strong flow rate. Mm-hmm. And as well keep water warm. So that's the kind of geeky stuff. And I'm like, really? So they were making little chips that were going into it. The finishes were nice. The designs at the time were there. So there's a combination of that. And at the same time, an editor for the New York Times, is what was interesting, had also they were doing, Brizo was doing a collaboration with Jason Wu, and she said you should do the scenography and design that launch. So those both happened kind of simultaneously at the same time. And between the two of them, so I met with Jason Wu, who was doing his first collection with Brizo as a fashion designer and stepping into that world. And had really interesting conversations with him, and then designed, again, the scenography for their presentation, which was based kind of on the arts and sculptural elements. And we presented the Brizo, Jason Wu's line for Brizo, and designed that. So those were the two synonymous parallels that were kind of happening at the same time.
That's really interesting. So when you say scenography, which is a word I've not heard very often, you're talking about the kind of the backgrounds and the sets and in which the fixtures and faucets sit within, right?
Correct.
That's really cool.
It was at Wanted Design. I mean, people will do, it's not staging because it's actually a scene. It's temporal, right? It's not there all the time. So a lot of times you'll see, yeah. So it's technically scenography. So architects or designers will do that. So sometimes it's to launch a store or something of this nature. In this case, it was to launch that. So we dove deep into, where Jason's inspirations were from, and fabrics and flowers. We CNC'd that and lacquered it, and touched to the finishes he was working on with Brizo, and Brizo's elevated way of, really nuances of finishes. So we European lacquered, CNC'd that again, and then presented it kind of presented the faucets in more of a objet way, and an inspiration from an artist named Chaim Steinbach. So he's probably one of the leads of the conceptual artists, and just presented them very cleanly, kind of as art, and it worked really well. People really, and it was not a lot of information, just more of, again, the scenography mixed with finish and nuances of what Jason Wu was doing, and at the same time, showing also Brizo's connection to that, but also the whole world of that. So it was a great project.
So those were actually physically constructed, spaces, I guess, or walls and scenes.
Correct. So you build it all. You design it, have it fabricated off-site, bring it in and install it in the environment. We kind of captured water as well, so you could let a faucet drain into something and then remove it, because it's all, again, temporal in a building. But we did it that way. So it was very obviously artistic and avant-garde in its presentation, and more of an explanation. So it was, again, scenography mixed with a presentation, less of a booth. Right. I thought that's why I accepted it. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool, because it's an interesting design project and problem to solve to do something like that. I imagine there's certain flexibilities and certain constraints that exist with that, as opposed to doing a real life, probably more flexibility than doing a real life thing sometimes.
Yeah, more flexibility than logistics. But, again, water, to me, I'm half Asian. My father's from Shanghai, China. My mom's Welsh. But for Asians, bathing is an experience. Water is an experience. I'm also a surfer. So anything having to do with water, it's, obviously a home's a sanctuary, but the bathing experience is even more intimate. It's more of a sanctuary, and we obviously have to preserve water, right? I mean, I believe so. Like, architects are stewards of the environment. We desecrate it by taking marbles from everywhere around the world, chopping trees down, putting them on boats, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to be kind of conscious about that. That's what I liked about Brizo doing it. But then going back to the element of, presenting this experience for people, it's like, hey, Jason was a fashion designer, is doing a collection for Brizo. Brizo is sustainable. They're providing you with, this water experience, and the way you should see it should be an experience, and the way you should, shouldn't say should, but it's more like it's beneficial to approach the things that you touch every day, like a fixture or your bathing experience, as something that is an intimate sanctuary and something that you actually enjoy, you look forward to, and in a way you covet that, right? Like, you're touching your fixture every day. So we tell clients, like, you want this or do you want that? I mean, it's something you interact with, like in the same way that people care for a bag as a fashion element, or shoes or scarf or what have you. It's probably used more often than anything other than shoes or bags, right? It's something that we do. So anyway, that presentation was an experience. So that's what was also really interesting about doing that specific, scenography experience.
I like, there's a lot of things that kind of unpack with what you said. The last bit we resonate a lot with, in part because we have a practice and we focus on high-end single-family homes. So a lot of the intimacy that you're kind of describing are things that we're very intimate with. And I think that's one of the fascinating and fun things about, sometimes challenging, but fascinating and fun things about designing homes, is you get that level of experience and nuance. And I also agree, because we had Judd Lord on the show, and Seth, and the way that they talk about their work is very much from a true passionate designer's perspective. And they geek out on stuff, and then we geek out on stuff, because how can you not when someone's so enthusiastic about the technology of a faucet? I mean, it's amazing.
Of course.
I think also what's interesting about this, all of this, is the partnership aspect, and I don't think it's. I mean, I don't know. I would kind of say it's maybe not super common for architects, designers, interior designers to maybe think of partnerships in that way, or be open to partnerships as often as maybe we should be.
I think that we should be, right? Because we, and so then and to your point, yes, like also you guys as architects and designers and doing high-end single family residential, et cetera, that it's about the relationship with the client. About the relationship with the client, as challenging as it can be, the reward also is that's where all those details and the experiences, that's where all the great work lives. The great work lives in those, as you said, the nuances and the things that are really mindful. That's what makes great design. That's what makes people feel good about it. And that's the true kind of, how do you want to say, like, work currency or energetic currency of great work, right? And then back to what you were speaking about of like collaborations or brand with architects or designers, et cetera. Brizo really opened that up, and they reached out to some people, and that they were respecting what they were doing in the work, and people, like, we would always give them back kind of comments of what we thought or things coming from clients. They were already doing this in a way. They were putting cameras in people's homes that chose to let them, I don't know if you heard about this, like touch their faucets, like on and off. How do they actually use it? So they're like, that's a little weird. I mean, like first everyone dresses up all nice the first 3 days, and on the 30th day, it's like full sweatshirts and they're doing it. So, but they're really interested in that information, and that's a user. But then the designer is the one that is thinking about all the nuances, all the areas that give this, beautiful creative currency and help elevate our projects. And then in that way, they were listening, and so anyway, they invited us to do a collaboration on a series, and we presented a bunch of ideas for the Litza collection, and thankfully they chose 2 of our handles and integrated that in, and like reducing escutcheon sizes and just little nuances and things. So they actually reach out, collaborate. Other people have some inputs, and they also bounce that critique off. So that relationship, they're very. Brizo treats it treats it seriously, but also treats it in a way that is collaborative and I think helpful in both sides of the industries, right? And I think that's impressive. Not everybody does that. Sometimes they just hire the industrial designer and they say, this is what we're going to do, and then they deliver it, as opposed to like this more give and take environment.
I didn't know that you were involved in whatever capacity with the Litza line. So how did that work exactly? You would send them like designs and...
Yep. I think they chose about 4 firms, 4 or 5 or something. Huh. They said, where do you think things are going? And where do you think things are going? They engaged, a few firms to do that. And I personally, for this, was like, my outdoor shower in my beach house is very industrial. It's shut off valves and copper, no PEX, like really well done copper in the beginning, but then it starts to tarnish. I love shutoffs. I just love the actually, again, us as geeking, like we're looking at manifolds all the time. We want our manifolds perfect. We want everything really dialed. Yeah. The client doesn't say, why isn't this working, et cetera. I mean, I really want everything, because that's going to show what the rest of the residents or hotels going to be like. Anyway, and I love simplicity, and I love working elements that are very simple, and they're kind of change over time with the wabi-sabi aspect of things, but they just are what they are. And so anyway, we presented shutoffs and knurled. So if you're wet, you could kind of touch things. So we went with tactile with the knurled. I wanted just shutoffs that were just elevated from your hot and colds. And they really loved that. And colorations, I really wanted to soften the brass situation and move more into champagne. So they started to of course, I'm not saying I did all every single thing, but these are the little ones that we did. Like
Yeah.
they started getting into this very nice, like champagne gold rather than the hard brass, because we would take brass fixtures and put vinegars and light acids on them to tarnish them, so they would turn quicker, because everybody likes to lacquer their brasses. So we would take it to a finisher so it would look a little more antique off the bat, because it's just a little too polished in some ways. Anyway, so, and just talking about some of those different tactile aspects of it. And that was that with Pizza. And then we did some more scenography for them to design so that they could showcase that. And then we work in kind of, I guess you would say, warm minimalism or wabi-sabi-ish, or wabi-sabi principles. So we design in that way, but also I think other people that are accomplished and well valued would also put pizza in the, maybe more conservative environment or more traditional environment. And I think that they use different people, different firms, which is great to kind of show where things can fit, because nothing needs to live black and white anymore.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And some would say maybe, that's just a trend of what things are happening. But I think it goes beyond the term trend when we're talking about the going beyond the black and white as you described it. I think the whole world is moving past that anyway. It's much more mixed up. It's much more interesting. It's much
100%.
more individualistic in a certain sense. I think the going back to the partnership aspect, it's a funny thing, because I think for maybe younger designers who have not practiced for a certain period of time, or maybe don't have their own practice, don't really understand or fully appreciate the importance of partnerships. I don't mean partnerships specifically with like a faucet company, but partnerships with a faucet company potentially, yes, and all different other kinds. And this extends also to just working with clients, as you kind of alluded to, right? It's when you resonate with the people. It's sometimes it's like after an hour and a half conversation, you just kind of know whether or not there's something there. Assuming there's enough professional alignment, then the conversation continues, and it feels very natural. And I find like sometimes those are the most fruitful.
100%. I mean, that I agree with you 100%. Is a complete ethos, and that I believe in that same sort of way. Like creativity lives in spontaneity, and spontaneity lives in relationship, and it lives in, as you say, I would say creative expressionism, and you said individualism, and that's individualism or expression, expressing yourself. And as you say, younger designers may not see that at the moment, but it is part of the next steps of the work. You have to step into that, because we all need each other to get there. Nothing's completely, absolutely original, right? And create spontaneity, creativity that lives in the spontaneity happens when we talk with each other, we cross disciplines, and et cetera. Like my father, architect, who's second partner of Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller is my godfather, obviously a huge visionary in the architecture, literary, and sustainability world, and et cetera. He would go drinking and at dinners at the West Village, and obviously Black Mountain College as well. But you have Osamu Noguchi, you'd have Merce Cunningham, you'd have John Cage, you'd have Bucky, you'd have Ritasawa. And they're all just chatting and talking to each other, right? And so Nakashima or Toya. So next thing you know, Osamu Noguchi is influencing Osamu Noguchi. And then all of a sudden, Issey Miyake just recently passed away. Issey Miyake was infatuated by Osamu Noguchi's Akari lamps. And so he did Please. So you have this is all from conversation. So, and I understand our world is far more digital and far more, and it's far more connected, and it's also disconnected. Neither is right or wrong, but the middle way is going to be where we come back to, as you say, collaborative relationships and those things which are really important. And maybe younger designers, you don't see it in your everyday practice, or you don't see it as you're designing or something, but to your point, it shouldn't be overlooked, and it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I like how you described it. First of all, we have to unpack some of those names you mentioned.
Right.
But I like also the kind of the understanding these partnerships and collaborations and relationships as being the next step, because there is a certain in the evolution of the designer, let's say, maybe in the initial kind of phases, there is a little bit of you need to focus on your work. It's a very internal kind of practice, and there's some aspects that's just inherent to it, and honing one's skills and one's ideas. And then, of course, after you go out into the world, I feel like you would just naturally realize very quickly that you cannot full stop do it on your own, as obviously it's impossible. And the deeper and more profound relationships are what's going to let you get further in many different ways.
And then the client steps in and says, and I've got this great idea. So, we have to navigate that, because it can be a great idea. Many times it is a great idea. They may not know the whole visualization. They may not know how to get to that great idea, but that may be their way of living, right? So we kind of say we'd like to make an artistry of living, right? We believe that people, you guys do, your practice is also high-end luxury living. And in that way, every single piece of it informs how they're going to live. And so they know in some ways how they want to live. They just don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. And then I remember as, a younger architect, and I'm like, I can't take that on, or I can't take this. But you realize that it actually is a good idea. You do have to collaborate, but you can still put yourself back into it. But yeah, you're right. It either comes with a client, it comes with, a landscape designer, another interior designer, or the artist. I mean, there's so many different pieces that get you there.
So maybe this is actually good with what you said in this last bit about working with clients. It's a good point to kind of tie in some of the big ideas from Brizo's most recent campaign, The Modern Goddess. And there's a number of really interesting principles embedded within it. And one of them is this focus on kind of self-empowerment and allowing individuals to be expressive of themselves in the broadest sense. And I think it certainly ties into what you just said with when you're a designer and you're trying to find, maybe over a period of time, you find what works for you and how you're expressing yourself. But then also, interesting, you have this client relationship. And when you're doing residential in particular, there is this aspect of helping the client also express themselves. And not only just in use, but certainly in use, but in other ways as well. How do you, that's a lot to unpack, I realize. So how do you kind of wrestle with all of those things?
I guess for anyone, but as a younger, maybe hopefully you have younger designers out there. And to your point of being internal, the internal bits, first and foremost, having absolute design conviction before you present. Making sure you see that whole picture of the vision based on their scope of work, based on who they are as people, get to know them, be intimate, etc. Okay, that's the predecessing relationship that gets you there. Now we're back to it. First step. Present with the design conviction your vision of what it's going to be. Now, in that, there is choices. Those choices, you're the stewards for the client, but the client's taking ownership of the choices that you're presenting to them. Mm-hmm. You must present choices that work for your vision, but it's their empowerment, their choice, etc., from what you brought to them. What you bring to them is going to work either way. So it wins, right? Because the work we're doing is for them. As architects and designers, we're in the service industry. We serve them. It's not a widget that is sold. A computer can't do our job. We can only use AutoCAD to draw and rendering programs to draw, but still our brains and our hands have to do all of the thinking, present everything. So once we know what we want, we bring that to them into the Modern Goddess. What I really like about it is it's empowerment. They get choice. So I know what I want to bring them of the Brizo. They may choose one finish or the other. I know they're both going to work. They might choose, one fixture line over the other, but I know that one of those two are going to work, and they get to be empowered by making that choice. That's their individuality. That's part of their artistry of living. They're putting a bit of that imprint in there because, we have to let that child go, which is that project. We love the child, we nurture it, we, give it food, water, it's born, grows up, and at a certain point we pass it over, right? And that we want the parents as the surrogate, if you will, in this analogy. We want them, they're making all the choices. We're just doing this nurturing and we're doing this creation, but it's also part of their creation. So we have to be very mindful about that. And those choices are luxury. Even if it's let's just say it's a small choice of a faucet, that's a great choice. That's like purchasing a bag or purchasing whatever, I'm using a fashion analogy because this is kind of a modern goddess situation, but just think of those things that you cover, that you want, you have every day. It's just kind of the same thing. You get to interact with, a faucet every day. So empower the clients, empowered, and at the same time, we're giving them what we know will work with our vision and theirs.
I like the analogy to parenting. It's actually, I've never thought of that. Maybe it's because I don't have kids, but as the project being the kid or the kid being a project. I don't know if you should view a kid as being a project, but
is it easy to give away your project? Is it easy to turn those? Tell me.
That's why I like the analogy. I mean, it works, and you're kind of either co-parenting or you're the tutor of the parent or something, as the designer and the owner, and eventually you kind of depart, and then you don't, hopefully you stay friends with the client. You might come over now and then, but you don't live in the house. It takes on this kind of other life. But what I like about that analogy is during the process of designing, during the project itself, the client's, more heavily involved during the design phases. It's like you are presenting them choices, and you're also, we found that a lot of people, if they bother to hire like a legitimate designer, not someone who's just a cheap draftsperson, right? A lot of times they're quite interested to know why this is better. The option A is better than B or better than C, or why do you have a preference for, A versus C or and whatnot. And it's a little bit of like empowerment through education. And it's interesting because we've seen clients over the course of a project from day zero to the end. By the end, they have a much better knowledge base of their project specifically, but sometimes about design kind of in general. And they feel more enthusiastic about their home, and dare I say empowered about their home, and also telling their friends about why X, Y, and Z is better than another thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, that's part of our profession, and I think it's, I mean, I do have a son. He's grew up here in New York and Montauk, and then he went off to Denmark and Copenhagen. And being in that culture and then being in this culture, I'll just use that one specifically. Culturally, they understand design very well. It's just part of their DNA, right? So for American clients, a lot of times there's a little catch up. We're not given that from the onset. People may not know who Buckminster Fuller is. Maybe they don't know who Salman Noguchi is or George Nakashima. They may not necessarily know that, Florence Knoll or some of the other Americans, designers. So, but when they start to step into design, it's not just draftsman you then are educating them. It gives them ownership and, as you say, empowerment of their residents. They're proud about it. They have a speaking point, and they have learned what we have educated them or given them or kind of led them into, and hopefully that takeaway brings them to a better knowledge base. They have a more appreciation of their home, and then hopefully also they want to, keep it and not redo or, knock things down or et cetera. That's the hope, right?
Or keep things tidy.
Or keep things tidy. Keep things tidy.
It really happens though, where people, when they move into a new home or a home's been heavily remodeled and they move back into it, I think one of the aspects that maybe clients don't realize is they either have to consciously do it or it happens subconsciously in the end. They change how they live slightly because 100%. They're in a new space and they're like, this is the when you're creating a new home, it's like the person is creating this as you're saying before, environment, this like environment that they want to be part of. It's an aspirational environment that then becomes a reality, which is remarkable. And then they're now living in this aspiration that they had. And sometimes they think, well, now I need to behave a little bit better in my home and not be such a slob or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, great design shifts the way people live, the way they live with their families, and in a beneficial way, the way that they entertain, the way that they think of things. Like we have a if we choose to take on a bespoke residential client, we have a pretty long kind of questionnaire for them, and we ask them all these cryptic questions in order to get to really the real intimacy. But one of them is their favorite hotel. And where that is, because I want to know what their aspirational living is, because, we've done some hotels and I love that aspect of it, because that's when we kind of let our guards down and we're open to a new way of living. If that can be brought back into them redoing their home, doing a new home, or, reconfiguring in a substantial way, you want to bring in their, as you say, the aspirational aspects of living and how they want to be, because you want to enhance the way that they are with their children, their partners, and their families, or who they entertain with. It's a shift, right? It's a big energetic shift to move things around, to physically take walls and build new structures and just reconfigure. That's a very big energetic opening, and we want to take advantage of that. All of us as great architects, designers, and et cetera, will want to take advantage of that and give that to them. It can be uncomfortable for them, but it's always good. So the aspirational aspect of it is, to your point, you're absolutely right. It's meant to shift them, and it's meant to get them into the next aspirational stage of how they're going to live, or how they're going to work or create.
And I think it's interesting you have a questionnaire, and one of the questions was about a hotel. What are some of the other questions in there?
We ask about restaurants, if they care to entertain, art, sculpture, books, more intimate family environments. So it's really touching on, I guess, the romanticism of everything: literature, art, home, food, again, hotels, gardens that they've been to. And we continue, because so the hotel is how they really want to live, right? Psychologically, it's how they want to live, right, but it's not how they're living today. The hotel places to visit are environments that they may not be able to move to or work in because of what it is, but they feel most comfortable in. Art is obviously where their art is, where their taste is, whether they know or they don't know. And you can get to a true passion of a human being through what they like of art. So they may love minimalism, like maybe a John Paulson situation, but they like Cy Twombly or something, right? They like more expressionist, but so you don't necessarily, those two are separate. Sculpture is speaking to the real architecture that they may like. We look to sculpture quite a bit. Obviously, we look at architecture. We try not to look at that as much as sculpture. For fashion, we look to colors. We never ever look to interior design for any color. It's only in nature or fashion. Those are the two areas. So the natural world for colorations, or maybe what's happening, kind of the dyes or patterns or et cetera that happen in fashion. That's just personally how we do that.
Real quick on that, I think all that's really, really fascinating, and one of the things that comes up pretty often on the show is how designers approach and have that initial conversations with clients to suss them out realistically, frankly, and to see if it's going to be a good pairing, because you need that good pairing, and sometimes it's not the case, even though everyone's a good person, fine, and it doesn't work out. But why, for the colors and like the palettes and thing, would you look at nature and fashion? Or maybe the question is, why would you not look at interior design? Because maybe for the average person, they would assume that if you're in interior design and architecture, that's the first place you would go to, is look at other interior design and other interior architecture heavily or even primarily.
I think, simply put, it's not timeless enough. It is. It can be too temporal and too seasonal. Fashion is genius because it's seasonal and they're structured. So, but they can move fast. We can't move that fast. So they're working through colorations or playing with things that are seasonal or trendy or otherwise, but they have to last quite a long time, or it's it's kind of a flash in the pants. Interior design colors just can come and go, and they can be a trend. And that is not, well, it's not the work that we are comfortable with doing. Nature doesn't lie. Nature will always give colorations that are natural, and every nuance is in between. So sometimes in beach projects, we'll look at a specific horizon, sunrise and sunset of that one area in Hawaii or in Bali or in New York or somewhere in Aspen. And we'll look in those colors and that striations and pull that in. Maybe the different colorations of snow in Aspen will give us our creams or our et cetera. Maybe McQueen does some really beautiful lace work, and the way he's putting stitching with fabric with the lace is holds texture, but also is like unexpected. So I hope that was kind of an explanation to
yeah,
it. Because
it is.
Because it's just too, it's too easy.
Yeah.
In a way, it's just too easy. Like, I love World of Interiors because it's not necessarily what we do, but what is being done. And that's what you were speaking to before. It's that gray area where it's very mindfully thought out, but it's very empowering and individualistic. You could call that the modern goddess, right? If you will. Like, it's so creative. You could have, Christian Lacroix paper, wallpaper, and then you could have a Caden sofa, and then you can have, I don't know, some crazy fixture or something, and it all works because it's all well done, and there are pieces and et cetera. And it could sit in a minimalist environment. It could probably sit in a maximalist environment. But anyway, so that impresses me. That's interesting. It's creative, and that's the same way we look at things that are unexpected, because we don't want to do something expected. I don't think it's timeless. It's just not the work that we necessarily do. It's not to say other work isn't important if they do look to the interior design world.
Sure. I mean, I resonate probably more with what you're saying than not. It's a kind of a strange. What would you call it? It's a sort of a paradox, it would seem on the outset. Looking to other things, but I like it because there's sources of inspiration, and I think actually it just occurred to me, this ties to another aspect of Brizo's campaign, which is we're talking about the self-empowerment and the expressing the individual, and that also ties to the ideas of beauty, expressing beauty on an individual person's terms. And on the one hand, as a designer, it's like, well, that's a can of worms, because I mean, like, everyone can do whatever they want. I don't think that's the intention. But I think what happens is that when everybody looks at the same interior design spaces heavily, and they're heavily referenced for projects at the beginning or whenever for clients and for designers, you get this thing where a lot of stuff ends up looking the same and sometimes and very often poor derivatives of each other. And that kind of the power of the individual and the power of the individual project and the beauty of an individual project doesn't exist anymore when that happens too much.
Yeah, it loses the the DNA just becomes watered down. It's not really what the client wants. They're not
Yeah.
really coming to have the same thing again. There may be a piece that resonates, or there may be like a window detail or a roof line. I want a 12-12 beautiful, roof pitch line or something, and that may resonate, but not the exact barn thing, etc. Like that's not really what they're asking for. So you're right. When we keep seeing it, and Instagram's amazing and dangerous at the same time. Pinterest is wonderful and destructive. Like, not anything is in any one way, but both elements can exist. And yes, if it teeters too far one way or the other, it becomes very monotonous or just very monochromatic, and not in a monochromatic way where it holds synergy. In something where let's just say whatever it is, maximalism to minimalism to wabi-sabi to brutalism, it just becomes unimpressive. Like, it just becomes like an execution, and I think most importantly, I'm trying to say it's not creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you have that extensive questionnaire that you send to potential clients, because it's really the best and fastest way.
You guys should create yours.
We have one that's version, not as exciting, but it's really like the best and fastest way to kind of get a hand and understanding like the personality and interest and really like who the clients are before putting them to test through a project, right? What's also interesting is that it seems to me that by asking those questions, you're trying to understand who they are, but also where maybe do they see beauty and pleasure, and where do they find their emotion into like nature, fashion, and all of those things, rather than being, for your kitchen, how many drawers do you want? Like down to the pragmatic type of questions. It's
right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because tying into the conversation, this last bit, when you look at an image of an interior design or an architecture, right, there's a tendency for people who are not in that profession to read it more superficially. It's not necessarily a criticism of the people, but that's just what it is. That's the case for any profession.
What they think it is. At the onset, it's how they think it is.
Exactly. And what you were saying, Marina, is like the questions you have on your questionnaire kind of jump right through all of that, jumps through the superficial down to the art, to the aspirational, to the other things we've been talking about. It's a real fascinating way to kind of solve the issue of understanding whether or not a person's a good fit and what their passions are and their interests and what makes them feel emotional about something, while also circumventing the problem of the superficial image of another architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, two things, both what you were saying and Marina was saying. Like, our studio is about sensory work. It's about the six senses. I don't believe that people, and if we do it right, we're going to evoke 1, 2, or 3, or a sixth sense, or multiple senses in our clients. That's where our work is good. But that's my barometer of if our studio's work is good, and if we've done the right thing. So it's about emotion, it's about experience, it's about all of their senses coming together. But they don't. The way that your point is, David, that they think that it's maybe or about X, Y, or Z is not what the work's about if it's going to be great. And it doesn't matter which designer you hire. It could be your first designer and they're young, or it could be a very accomplished architect and they're older. It's irrelevant. It's a way that it's thought about, approached, that all the senses, are as many as they can be engaged. And that you get to the emotive quality of the clients, of the people, office, hotel, whatever it ends up being. Because when you go to Rome, what you feel like. If you're going to Bali, or I can name a lot of places in the world. I don't know where people exactly are, but there's somewhere that they've been to that they've had an architectural or spatial experience. They can't put their finger on it, but they felt like in Rome, you feel quite small and it's very huge because that's, they made the scale to be up to the gods. You know that feeling. When you walk into a hotel room and you feel really, really comfortable and you can sleep well. You also know if you walk into an office or another one, it feels vapid and vast. You don't need to go to architecture school to do that. And it's not about a drawer or something. So you're right. I need to get deep in these people's emotive and creative and kind of how they're feeling in order to figure out if we're going to do the work together and how the work is going to be. Because frankly, we could do their drawers in our sleep, like our kitchens.
Yeah.
At this point, that's not even a question anymore. So yeah, we do make it very cryptic because of your point, Marina, you said about the drawer system. We don't want to even know about that. They love to launch into that and very quietly extract that out, and I hope I don't come across as, to whatever know-it-all or stuff, but I really try to quiet that mind down quickly for them because they're not coming to us or you guys or elevated designers who are doing mindful work. They're not coming to us for that stuff. That could very easily be done. Like a drawer inside of a drawer, easy. Putting leather inside there, no problem. Kerfing your knives so they slot in properly and never nick each other, simple. All of that is easy. But what's not easy is the other bits, and that's what they're really coming to. So it's kind of like putting the brakes on them,
right? Because
that's not really why they're there. But they don't know that, to your point. They don't know that in the beginning.
I love this topic because it's something we think about very often. And it's a very challenging thing. It's a challenging dance and a way to maneuver and to work with people in a successful way. I think even and you're totally right that most often, not always for sure, but a lot of times clients will start off with hyper-specific things that they've had on their wish list, which is understandable because it's like, I've had this drawer, I hate this drawer, I want this to be solved in the new house. It's like, we will do that. Let's take a few thousand steps back a little bit, but yes, I understand that drawer is very important to you. We will solve that for you for sure. But even when clients initially start the conversations with those things, very often they still deep down want what you're describing. They just don't know it enough to say it. And we've seen where designers make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, the client is focusing on these things, so I'm going to answer them the opposite of quietly, as you put it. And we're going to make that the central focus. And that's going to be how I prove my value. That's going to be, I don't know, the main thing of the project. And in the end, the clients are content, maybe, but they're a little bit underwhelmed. And it's like, you've kind of messed up as the designer in that case because you aren't seeing the bigger picture, even if it's imperceptible, I guess.
Yes, very true. It's very true. It's a balance and it comes with the experience and it comes with that, of course. And to what you're saying, it's absolutely important. I love when people come with their list of things. Otherwise, it's this open-ended scope. Yeah. You're not quite sure. And it just keeps circling around. So I love when they come to that. They really have a longer and a detailed scope of work. It's really important. I mean, we'll also say in meetings, I really, really like to know what you do not care for. It is as important as what you care for because they don't really know. Majority, they don't know what they really want. They know what they like-ish, but they don't really know. And they're not supposed to. That's our job, right? That's why they came and entrusted us with it. So it's okay that they don't. And so, again, to the younger ones out there, the no's are very important. Don't disregard a no, because it's as important as a yes, right, for that situation. But managing all the little small things that can be done that are nuances that you never want to live with, the door there or the drawer, that thing, no problem. We'll fix that. But don't let it overpower the project because you won't serve them. Again, back to a service industry, we must serve the client to do good work. Like, we can be egotistical as we all are as architects. We can be know-it-alls as we all are. We can geek out on, tensile strengths of concretes and this, that, and the other thing. No problem, right? But at the end of the day, we're creating this, for them in our vision. And you want to deliver them, obviously, all the small things, but most important is that really big vision. That's what's going to change their lives.
Yeah. I really like this idea of the designer. It can be described in many ways and wears many different hats, but the idea that they are a kind of, I don't know what the word is, not chauffeur, it's sort of like a champion or an agent of cultivating like the inner things that makes a client feel a certain way about a space, and trying to like unearth that and then give it presence in the project and make that beauty come to the surface. It's a very difficult thing.
It's definitely difficult.
So we have to
tiring.
Yeah, it is. That's 100% true. I think we were saying the other day, one quality, like someone was asking, what would you say the key qualities an architect or designer must have? I'm like, there's like 1,000. I said, well, one of them for sure is they have to be, what did I say? Resilient. You have to be resilient for sure.
100%. They 100%. They didn't give us, reinforced concrete and reinforced structure and physics, and then also psychology and psychiatry and that whole thing. They didn't give the other bit of the arts, to not deal with all of that. You have to deal with all of it, and you have to be resilient. And yeah, it is definitely, architecture is the most rewarding profession, I think. I mean, obviously, I also started a clothing company and owned a restaurant. It's the most rewarding profession. It also is for the long haul. It really, you have to, your heart, your whole being has got to be in it, or it can get to you. It can be very challenging because you have to give as much to yourself, as much as yourself to your client and the projects. And then you have to be able to have enough for yourself to be able to continue to give it again. So it's a constant, it's a constant energetic, output.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point, though, that I think people in this industry struggle with is, like you said, keeping enough for yourself. I guess in a more generic way, the work-life balance is one way to describe it. But that is, it's an issue in the industry, frankly, very often.
It is for your next podcast.
So we do have to talk about your background and how you became the principal of your office and the journey that led you there, because it's maybe not the typical one. If the typical one is a person who went to architecture school at a young age and started practicing immediately and then eventually had an office, you went and did a bunch of different things. And of course, you had mentioned that Buckminster Fuller was your godfather. So what kind of just tell us the story and unpack some of that for us, because it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'll go as quickly and succinctly as possible. So my father had his own firm. He originally in New York, he worked for Edward Durrell Stone. He became Edward Durrell Stone's chief designer. He was the lead architect for what is now called the Kennedy Center. So he presented at the Kennedy. Kennedy passed away. It was supposed to be a different thing. He got named. He did quite well. Meets my mom. He says, let's go start my own practice after this. He moves on from Stone's firm. He had earlier in school met Bucky and did a few lectures, etc. from him. He went on to be an architect of very large universities. So he was doing very large scale projects. He did an elongated dome with MCOR for Cleveland State University, I believe. And there was a little bit of some issues with the dome, not necessarily with the mathematics of Buckminster Fuller, but of the contractor of building it. He didn't throw Bucky under the bus, and he was just really he was just really stood for Buckminster Fuller's principles.
Wow.
Bucky's first partner was Shoji Sadao. Shoji Sadao worked on World Game with him. He worked on a lot of huge projects with Bucky. At that time, and Buckminster Fuller and Osamu Noguchi were very, very dear friends from not only from Black Mountain College, from New York. Shoji Sadao, who was an architect that was stewarding and helping Bucky get a lot of his a lot of the projects going, had started working a lot with Osamu and getting a lot of Osamu's public projects out there as architect. Bucky went to my father and asked him to be the second partner. So they formed the firm Buckminster Fuller, Sadao, and Zung Architects. So now it was Buckminster Fuller, Shoji Sadao, and my father. My father kept his office in Cleveland, Ohio. There was one in Long Island City, and then there was Bucky's main office in Philadelphia. So that all happened. And that's how Bucky became my great godfather when I was quite young. And I was just...
That's a very well said and very concise. I'm actually impressed how well you compacted all that into the story. But
okay, good. I hope it was a story.
No, that was amazing. I was impressed. That's wild, though. I mean, they were truly wild. So
no, it was incredible. And then I was quite young, and I'm just around, just listening to Bucky and Merce Cunningham and Osamu Noguchi, and I'm like, okay. And this is all just really osmosis. It's coming in, and Bucky's talking to me about we're going to Maine and staying on his island, and he's taking me out in boats and cars he shouldn't be driving and all this stuff. And he's just talking and going on, and like he does, if you watch any videos of him, and he would speak to a young 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old the same way he would speak to Einstein. It was the exact, or the President of the United States. There was absolutely nothing in between. He just assumed that you were a human being and you're here for a purpose, and he just gave everything in that sort of way. So he would just go on and on. And I just took that all on an osmosis. I learned a lot about architecture, design, and thinking from Bucky in a metaphysical sense. I learned the practice of architecture from my father. Anyway, so then architecture school, the premier one at the time was University of Colorado Boulder, had the environmental design program. Mm-hmm. So I chose to go there just because of the environmental aspect of it. So finished that, wanted to rebel against my father's large firm. I worked for him during the summers. I was like, okay. I started a surf skate streetwear company in my garage in Laguna Beach, and did pretty well. Yeah, did pretty well. And decided to move it to New York City and do men's runway, which made no sense. So now we're doing took all the money we made from streetwear and started doing this little higher elevated runway stuff.
How long were you in Laguna Beach in Southern California, right? There's not
It was in La Jolla and then Laguna and then Venice Beach. So I mean, it was about 8 years, something between.
Oh wow, you were down there for a while.
8, 9 years.
Yeah.
And then bi-coastal for a while in New York, had a loft in Venice and a loft in Worcester Street, and then just did not fashion. I loved it, moved fast, and I found that it was a great creative outlet to not step right back into architecture from working with my father. And I knew I didn't want to do these large scale architecture. I knew that design to me was a little more intimate. And it was a great lesson to step in, because I was basically supposed to go right into his firm. And I just kind of took that time, but to do what I needed to do and find my foundation. And at the same time, fashion moves so quickly that there's a bit of purpose that I felt wasn't resonating, and there was some bit of a full potential that I could be doing where fashion didn't really have that. So I took a hiatus and did a kind of a celebrity run restaurant called Moomba with some friends for a while, and that did really well. And then I'm like, I do not want to spend so much time. I had relationships with people from the fashion and architecture and surf skate and et cetera.
How did because each of these industries are all very difficult in their own right. And okay, well, going a bit back, why did you end up going from Colorado to California? I mean, did you have ties in California?
Yes, I did. My wife, who I married, was also from California.
Gotcha.
So we went back there to start that. And she was also really interested in fashion. So we were both at Boulder together. She was at the art school. I was at architecture and environmental design. And we met, went back to California. I was like, yeah, I think that's where we want to be. I was skiing, snowboarding, surfing. And I just thought that would be a really, really good place to be. And I had to rebel. You have
right.
to
Right.
kind of have to do that.
Wait, where are you from originally? I don't think we had covered that.
I was born in Ohio.
Okay.
And I grew up there till I was about 13. 14.
Gotcha. Well, the thing about the story that strikes me is also, again, as all of those different industries are very different. And it seems from what I understand, you had a fair amount of success with each of these different things. So when you transitioned from California to New York, as we did that same trend, or I guess we did the same transition. New York's a very different place. Fashion, as you said, is very, very fast-paced, at least compared to what we do currently. Was that like a culture shock? Was it difficult?
In one way, yes. In another way, not so much. The culture shock was, not having, a Southern California way of living, which is healthier, and you're able to be outside and you can surf or skate or hike or what have you. You can get to the beach or you can go up to the mountains. So that was challenging. And then I had to find Montauk and far out to be able to surf to kind of balance that. But that was very challenging. The conversations in California about creativity, arts, etc., are not as expansive as they are in New York, where you have influences from Europe, South America, Eastern Europe, regular Europe, and the West Coast, etc., all over the place. Those conversations were, I believe, that's what kept me in New York. That's what was inspiring me, like all these disciplines of artists coming together. And it was still kind of, you could still have lofts downtown. You could still, it was more of it was a little bit easier Petri dish as it is now. It's a little more challenging and things are spread out, right? That was so inspiring to me, just to be, to see Grace Jones on top of a table dancing and then speaking to Peter Beard or Schnabel, or I mean, it was just, and then fashion designers and other artists or photographers, like that to me was incredible. And they're just, again, the same thing that I guess I was like watching with Bucky and my father when I was younger. It felt like home. It felt familiar, as difficult as the city is. So I just had to find places, like you have to, as a, be working hard as an architect or interiors or et cetera, you have to find that, time to give back to yourself and that solace. And to me, it's, surfing or snowboarding or something like that. And just finding those things. And I was able to find that. And I got the brain food that I needed.
Interesting. Because I was going to say, the kind of surf culture on the one hand would seem very different from living in, I don't know where you are, in Manhattan or Brooklyn,
I'll take the fifth on that one for the East Coast.
Oh, you don't surf on the East River?
No, it's just a different etiquette. I mean, I think, David, in California, it's very, or, Hawaii, the etiquette is very different. And I get it, like surfing's newer in the East Coast. It's just, the etiquette is just a little different. So it could be a little, and the waves aren't as good. It's just a little bit different. So, but as long as you don't take that one or two wave that serious, which you shouldn't, it's okay. It's all fun,
So I don't know the timelines of like when Buckminster Fuller had passed, but what was he like?
Oh, wow. He was an extraordinary human being. I mean, he was so loving, so caring, and like I was saying, he just spoke to everybody very equally. It was really like he would just, didn't matter who you were. If he was interested or wanting to have a conversation, he would just feed you with knowledge and experience. Very metaphysical. Like many people don't see the world like geniuses like this do, or so I think it's challenging. I think it was challenging for him, looking at it from the outside. But again, I was quite young. He passed. He passed when I was probably only 14 or 15, I think at the time, 14-ish. So I had known this. Best way I can explain it is osmosis, like just taking in all this information. Very real, very intelligent, and just very, very pragmatic in a very comic way. Like we were eating breakfast once up at the Ritz or Four Seasons and something like that, and he would have to eat prunes as he was older, and then he would also have tea with lemon. And she would bring him. He ordered prunes on the side, and I think she brought like 2 prunes and then tea with 4 lemons. And he had this kind of dissertation, like, could we do this bit of a trade because it doesn't make sense? She's like, no, I can only bring you this much. And he just went into this really comical thing with the waitress, very kindly, about like, it makes no sense you're bringing me an entire lemon, but only these 2 prunes. And just really cute, funny things like that, which were real. And he broke it down into this like, again, funny, pragmatic way. But he was, back to who he was that kind of real person. He would speak to anybody. He was so inspirational. The way he saw things, like he could see the universe in a way clearly that most people could not see. And he was dedicated to inspiring humans to be the best that they could be, no matter what it was, to being thinkers and challenging everything that they absolutely saw. He took a year of his life, and he didn't speak, not even to his wife. He reappropriated language when he invented the tensegrity and the geodesic dome. He coined things. He stopped saying, like I said, sunrise and sunset. He's like, Tommy, you can never say that. The sun never rises. It never sets. It always eclipses. You don't go upstairs and downstairs. Like, is that true for the Southern Hemisphere? Are you really going downstairs when you're going up? Be very careful with language. Be very careful what you say. Like, and so he'd have these. He'd have these very interesting conversations. Or I was playing baseball at the time, and he said, "Oh, you're throwing the ball at 100,193 something miles a minute. That's the speed of light." So these funny, comical things that he would do, but they were very, very intuitive and interesting. And his free thinking, like limitless. He was absolutely limitless in what he thought anyone could do if they just put their minds to it. And it was just incredible to see and be around. And he never dismissed anything anyone would say. And that's kind of about the collaborative nature of things. People's minds put together with where there's a will, there's a way, can do so much. It's just that we get in our own way, with our dogmatic or our, politics or otherwise. But, and that was so inspirational to me as a young age. And maybe that's why I challenged myself to do all these different things. And yeah, they were definitely challenging, but it's also taking those steps of failures and successes makes it all sweeter and makes it feel more comfortable, for me to go back into architecture and find that home. You have to find your true north on your own. The boat's going to drift. You're definitely going to sail in the wrong direction for a while before you find true north. Like sails luffed, things are just not there. Boat capsizes a few times.
Yeah,
you got to swim.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think it's interesting. I think his Buckminster Fuller's legacy is there's the kind of like true architectural and technological aspects of what he did, which was fascinating and genius. But the ethos behind everything, what he stood for, was very unique and certainly way ahead of its time in a lot of ways, including the technology and all the other things. And I feel like maybe this is hopeful and optimistic, but the next like decade or so is when a lot of the things he was talking about now are becoming more mainstream in a lot of ways.
You totally got it, 100%. You know, he was talking about the internet before the internet happened, like a communication channel where everybody, it was free and everyone was doing it. So, and a lot of younger generations are really looking back to him. And doesn't have to be about a geodesic dome or things like that, right? Like, okay, fine. The geodesic's a very strong system, tension and compression. It made Harry Kroto get a Nobel Peace Prize for nanotechnology. It holds pharmaceutical drugs together in a very small way. It's called the buckyball tensegrity. That's Bucky's math. Great, amazing, right? It helps us like in that way, structurally and et cetera. But to your point, it's not about that necessarily as a driving factor. It's about the whole way that he's thinking of things and how progressive and how he saw things. And that's why he was seeing into multiple universes, 100%. Like I could see that. Couldn't understand it at the time. I can see it when I meditate and I get glimpses of it, but I was never seeing it. I'm not seeing it the way that he saw that. And that's okay. We're all different, but hopefully that the younger generations, or all generations, specifically younger, are looking into that. If they take that into any discipline, that's amazing. Obviously, a lot of technology people are looking at Bucky's philosophy and ethos, because like Nine Chains of the Moon, some of these books that he's written, these ethos and philosophies will take us so far. And you just can put it into, obviously, Musk is doing it. So many people are taking parts of it. Actors are doing it. Like, you just need to take some of it and infuse it in. Doesn't matter what discipline. You do not have to be an architect, author, mathematician. You can really be anyone. But he's talking about humanity. He's talking about the planet. He's talking about the universe and a way to actually survive together as peacefully as we can. And again, without getting into the nuances of any political environment, we can take a little piece of that and add it into our lives. And that's all we need. It's just taking a little bit, it's too much to think about solving everything at once. We have to solve one little bit, right? Like that's too big to think about. Taking one little thing and making it our own. And then maybe next year, the next day, we take another little seed and we take care of that. That's how we all become a more evolved, self-realized society. The rest of it, you just want to lie down and go to sleep forever. And, it feels like COVID's coming for another 10 years.
That's all really phenomenal. Kind of finishing up the story. So, what brought you back, in a certain sense, back to architecture and interior design?
It was natural. I always loved it. I did it. I was buying. Obviously, I didn't want to do the restaurant forever and all of this, and bought like little surf shack in Montauk and another one, and redid it and sold it. And people asked to, can you do my building or this brownstone or that? I'm like, sure, of course I can. And I said, if I can do it on my terms in this different sort of intimate way, I'm so impressed by my father's work. I just couldn't do that. He's impressed by my work on a different, in a different scale and intimate that way. And he's like, I couldn't do that. I just had to find my true north, as I was saying earlier, on my own terms, right? So it felt like my own. And that organically came. And I said, that's really what I should do. And it was and is rewarding. And that's how I knew that it was right. Not like taking out how difficult it is or how frustrating, how exhausted it was. Like, does it fulfill my heart? Yes, it does. Do I put my head down on my pillow at the end of the night and I feel like I'm okay with what I've done? Yes, I do. Can I try to your point, educate clients about making as sustainable decisions as possible wherever we can. Yes, I'm doing that. Am I teaching or educating slightly people about their homes or arts or culture or architecture or, way of living? Will they be kinder to their partners or children, et cetera, because we've made something that's aspirational to them? Yeah, I can see those sorts of things. Are they appreciative? Yes. Okay. So those things all were surrounding me finding my heart being happy. And then therefore that was the true north. And then all that other stuff you just have to swim through.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys focus strictly or solely on residential, or do other types of things here and there?
We do other types of things. It's our primary practice. We don't do public works, political or public works. We do wellness spaces if it's in an office environment. So we've done acupuncture studios, PT, Pilates, and regenerative Reiki. So in the wellness space, we do that. And we've done boutique hotels. And the only competitions that we do are disaster relief type competitions. So where people are displaced, and kind of how to solve the displacement of people. So those are competitions, never the other ones, at least at this point.
Yeah.
Because humans can't survive if they're displaced. It doesn't matter if it's in Sri Lanka or in Louisiana. Like, you take a home away from somebody, you've taken everything. So I think there should be ways to eventually drop pods and have solar compostable toilets. You take apart pods, and that can be a temporary home. Like, we should find ways to do that. Like, just drop these, be able to drop things easily, and people are able to capture their water and all of that. Because how can they get back on their feet? Haitians, or how can they do that? You take somebody's home away, like.
It's impossible.
I don't know. And then
it's
impossible. Yeah. It seems insurmountable to me. So anyway, so that's where the practice is at the moment.
That's amazing.
And the development where we design, and I started a contracting company in the Hamptons. We built Atelier by Studio Zung. It's eco-luxury spec residences.
My final question is kind of metaphysical, I suppose. Do you feel like you are a unique designer? Maybe I asked that specifically within the context of New York City. We were there for 7 years practicing and working. And in that place, and also I think in architecture and design in general, architects and interior designers it's very, let's say, competitive. It's a lot of work, long hours. And there's kind of a mentality, I think in particular on the East Coast, of sometimes just more, faster. And a lot of what you said in this last bit, there's it seems different to me.
Because we're in New York, do engage in, faster. There's no sleep times. There's no real, that we do. At the same time, we do our best to subscribe to being as holistic as possible, slowing down and choosing clients wisely, thus questionnaires and et cetera, because we are spending 1, 2, or 3 years of your life with them. So we are, and that takes time. Like, don't get me, there's a lot of things that were, maybe not the wisest choices for health or otherwise prior to that, but we really subscribe to that more now. It's definitely fast. It's definitely quick. But in New York City, as you know, things, you can touch all parts of the world very easily. And then back to why did I go back into architecture? Because I felt like if I can do work that's sensorial and that has, and that's our ethos and mantra, as well as being, eco, that's just because you have to. We feel like we have to. You find your place there, and then therefore there's room for the other architects and interior designers and et cetera, because everybody finds their kind of voice, hopefully, right? And it is very competitive. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing how competitive New York is or anywhere else, but knowing that you do this thing and you do it well, if I see something that looks like something else, I say, you know what, this firm is best suited for that. And I've been in meetings and they've been great, big developers, and they show me an inspirational board. And I'm like, you should go there. And I had another, kind of a friend of mine is also, architect, is a surfer and very successful studio. And I'm like, well, if you're showing me this type of work, you should go to Alesh. Like, he's the one that does that, and you just have to point it, or like, if you're a firm, like, go, maybe that's a right fit, don't, you have to take commissions to keep the lights on. That goes without saying. And we're always teetering on some edge of bankruptcy in some sort of way, right? As architects, we're like scared artists, right? Yeah. We need the patron to do our work, right? We can't just go out there and do it and form an Anish Kapoor and say, that's a few $1 million, pay me later. It doesn't work that way. So we're a little, we're a little fearful. We're artists, but we're a little bit fearful in that way. So we find that. So in knowing that, there's nothing wrong with it. We just have to know that we're stewards of our clients' money. We have to, be very wise about how we do that, how we spend their money. Anyway, all that being said, we have to think to ourselves, what are we best at? What are we good at? And stay in that lane, in that way. I don't want to say lane, but stay in that ocean. Some people like the Atlantic Ocean, some should be in the Mediterranean, some should be in the Pacific. Stay there in that, and then as it grows, it grows. But, I don't know if they're the IMPs anymore, right? You could do so many disciplines of work, right? You could do so many different things. I don't know, right? Like, I don't know if that, maybe it can, but I think it's a little bit wiser to just stay there, and then you don't feel that anxiety of all the other competition out there and everything. You always have anxiety of getting commissions, but you don't have it like another sense of moving over. Yeah, it's kind of like extract a little bit of it out, and then that helps also the choices.
Interesting.
I'm curious, what's next for you and for your studio? Like, do you guys have, I don't know, types of projects you would want to like start doing? Do you have personal projects and new ventures that you want to, start as well? Yeah,
like for Brizo, and our relationship with them has strengthened so much through Atelier by Studio Zung. That's the eco luxury spec residences. I'm really excited about that. It's doing really well, and I really, really think it's important. So being able to give, a turnkey residence that has some art in it and furniture, and we strengthen strategic partnerships, and we can explain. We have the kind of the time to explain that. I'm really excited about that, and we are going to start doing more boutique hotels. So we've thankfully shortlisted, because I think that's like those dream ways of living. So we're opening up to that again. And so that's exciting to do that. Those are the two things. And then strengthening and continuing to choose really wisely where we're working on these residences that we can make a difference. That like kind of the whole thing is together. We're really, the past year and a half, we've been taking clients that want to build collections. I really believe that furniture, art, it's collectible. Now this wonderful thing with First Dibs and I think Instagram too, again, on the positive, it's showing people pieces that can be held, sold. It holds value. Phillips is trading, Sotheby's. We all know that. In the trade, we know that it's been doing that, but it's far more in the spotlight. People are seeing, when the Four Seasons were selling all the furniture, then everybody wanted the Le Corbusier because they were at the table, people were buying all of this or whatever pieces that they were, certain booths and et cetera. It's becoming more infused into American communities and design aspects. And so we're really encouraging this not encouraging, we're taking work that it is not throwing away furniture. It's not getting things that will fall apart and not buying into that temporal sort of interiors. Really like redoing pieces and finding things that will have value. Yes, you may say you don't want them anymore, but you'll still be able to sell some of these pieces, sell most of your pieces and recuperate, because it's an investment, because it's something that is a collection. And It should be thought the same as your cars. It should be thought the same as your bags or your watches or your art. It's equal. It's another aspect of your life that is important. That's exciting.
That's super interesting.
Cool.
Tommy, this was phenomenal.
Great. Thanks, guys.
This was awesome.
You.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.